Please join with me in the spirit of prayer. God of grace and God of glory, on your people pour out your power. Embrace us, empower us, embolden us to be your people, to let your wisdom sing to our hearts, to be experienced in our lives, to be shared with others, not only here and now on this day, but indeed every day for countless weeks to come. In the strong name of the one who calls us and is in our presence today, Jesus the Christ. Amen. I want to invite you this morning as we open our imaginations to Paul's words about the fruits of the Spirit. Would you turn to a nearby neighbor and would you share with that person your favorite fruit? So I did exhaustive research for five whole minutes this last week to figure out what were the most popular, most consumed fruits in the United States. All right, if I'm going to be honest, for 3 minutes I watched a hilarious video. But for 2 minutes, I was all in finding out the most consumed fruits in the United States. At number 5, we actually have a fruit that's grown in our own backyard, a Sunshine State staple, the orange. Did you know that the average person consumes 9 pounds of oranges every year? And as Floridians, we are obligated to do our part. At number 4, we have another fruit that's grown in our own backyard. This one has a whole festival dedicated to its sweet glory. We have the strawberry. A normal strawberry has 200 seeds located within it. At number 3, the most popular fruit consumed in the United States, this one comes in a vast variety of shades and colors, from purple to pink to black to white to green. We have grapes. I know a number of people prefer to consume their grapes in its squashed, fermented form, just like Jesus consumed wine that way. At number 2, we have my favorite fruit that has over 7,500 varieties grown worldwide. My mom told me that one of these a day would keep the doctor away. Apples, right? And so then that arrives at number 1, the most popular consumed fruit in the United States. Any guess?
Bananas.
It's a banana, actually.
The whole choir just said bananas.
Oh, well. And did you know, don't just throw away the peel to a banana. It can actually be used to help whiten your teeth. I read that online, so it has to be true. What I think we certainly know to be true, as we've sort of journeyed through Paul's letter to the church in Galatia, is that those first few chapters of the letter, they're sort of tough sledding. Those first few chapters in Paul's letter to the church in Galatia, initially Paul sort of sounds like a parent scolding a child who's late to curfew. For 126 verses, Paul sort of rants with this raw emotion to his friends there. For 126 verses, Paul sort of sounds like his favorite dwarf of the seven was grumpy. And then last week, when Paul gets to chapter 4, he turns on this dime and he offers the Galatian church then and there, and our church today, this vision of how a church that is diverse might find its unity. Remember, the Galatian church was divided in countless different understandings in their citizenship, in the ways that they approached life. And yet Paul invited them to find connection and community with one another. And if you're anything like me, I've spent this last week sort of wondering how. How in the world, in the midst of the diversity and the differences that we find ourselves living and leaning into in the world today, how do we find that connection and community with one another? Paul continues on that theme this morning by offering us this litany of the fruits of the Spirit. He starts off with the fruits, naming them as love, joy, peace. 3 words that we usually associate with the season of Advent. 3 candles that we light in the Sundays before Christmas. 3 words, love, joy, peace, that we proclaim Christ embodied and lived in his life. Paul continues on with the list: patience, kindness, generosity. 3 words I think that we teach our children a great deal about. But when I'm honest, those words, kindness, patience, generosity, sometimes as adults, we struggle and we stumble trying to live those words with one another. But Paul isn't finished. He rounds out the list by offering up faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Sometimes when we hear that litany, that list, it can sort of, my initial response is to let my shoulders slump and my soul sag just a bit. It can feel like one more thing that we have to do. So much in Christianity too often has been used with those harsh, hard verbs of ought and should. So much of spirituality often comes around to clinging to control and just trying to white knuckle or force our faith. And so we might hear Paul's words initially and think of this as a list of something that we just have to do. But I want to hover around this list a little more and actually dig deeper into the metaphor Paul is offering to us. Think about a fruit tree, your favorite fruit tree or bush, the way that it grows. And certainly that seed that is planted, it does certain things, but there's also certain things that cause that seed to grow and bear fruit that are beyond its control. A fig tree can't force itself to produce more figs. You'll never see a fig tree roaming around the titles of the self-help section of Barnes & Noble trying to educate itself. There's some things that a fig tree naturally, normally does, but can't be forced. They just sort of naturally, normally happen. A fruit tree will try to reach its roots down deep into the ground, into the dirt, into the soil, try to absorb all the nutrients it can. It'll try to stretch the branches and leaves outward to soak in the sun and to gather the rain. But it can't predict the rain. It can't force more sunlight. And part of what I think Paul is alluding to here with the fruits of the Spirit is yes. Yes, there are things you and I might do to cultivate, to care for, and to maybe even produce these fruits in our lives. But we also have to be open for the ways God is caring for us and calling them forth. And unlike other litanies where Paul offers lists in other letters, I think part of what Paul is pointing at here to the church in Galatia and to us today is that all nine of those words have already been planted inside each and every one of us. Inside you and me, there is already love, joy, peace. There's patience, kindness, generosity. Already embodied in each and every one of us is faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And God is working in all of our lives to awaken, for us to be embraced and held, and to embody those in such a time as this. And yet, perhaps, as we dig a little deeper with this list that Paul is offering to us, we might wonder if these words are they out of touch? Are they out of date in the world in which we live today? Can such a list, can those 9 words really make any difference in the world where we find ourselves? For many in the sanctuary here today, to pick up again on Paul's metaphor, we can feel like a fruit tree that's planted in the desert. For so many today, people's souls just feel parched. The physical, spiritual, emotional strain of daily living can feel like too much. And yet Paul, I think, still offers us a good question to consider. What then is being cultivated in our souls? Because like a tree planted deep in the dirt, you and I have soil in our souls. We, like the creation around us, are made from dust, blessed by God. And so what? What's growing in our midst? What's growing in the soil of our souls is fear, frustration, faithfulness, some hybrid seed of all that. What's being cultivated and cared for in our communal connections with each other? Misunderstanding, mistrust, blame, trying to listen, learn, lean into one another. I realize that it can sound incredibly naive, but there's something about this litany that Paul offers that echoes across the centuries, and it sings to my soul. I want you to listen to this list once more. And is there one word, one of these words that sort of kind of causes your heart to leap? Is it love? Joy? Peace? Patience? Kindness? Generosity? Faithfulness? Gentleness? Self-control? Or maybe another way to enter into this list that Paul is offering to the church still today is to write down a definition that comes from deep within for such a time as this. As I've sort of held on to and tried to be held by these words over the last few weeks, I've thought about, is gentleness, is that just about the tenor and tone of my words? Is it a way that I receive other people? Is it some combination of both? Is kindness more than just the Midwestern politeness I was taught as a child? Maybe kindness is about having regard for all people. Maybe patience is about having a soft focus, especially for people who push all of my buttons. Several weeks ago, the Bible study classes spent some time prayerfully playing with these words. One of the people in our Bible study class came up with a fruit for each one of these words and a reason why she found that fruit meaningful for that word. Other people in our discussion around the table associated a hymn title with each of these words as a way to dig a little deeper into them. Love divine, all loves excelling. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Other people took out their crayons and colored these words. Maybe that generosity was a bright, bold yellow like the sun shining outside that could actually drench the world today. Maybe kindness was a soft periwinkle that's in much need in our world. And I realize that in our diverse congregation where faith is not one size fits all, Paul's words, these 9 words, might not resonate for every person here. But for me, as I've sort of been held by these words over the last few weeks, I've come to realize that my sheroes and my heroes, the people who have ministered to me in my faith, in some ways, each and every one of them not only embraced these words, they embodied them. So there's something about love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, self-control, and gentleness. There's something that I want to listen to in the days and the weeks to come. There's something that I want to learn, something that I want to lean into. And I realize that as these words kind of swirl around me, as I try to live them out, I'm probably going to stumble and bumble about in the world. That in my attempts to faithfully live these words with all of you and with others, I'm probably going to stumble about with all of the grace of an elephant dancing on banana peels. There's probably some video of that out there online you could check out as well. But for me, I find Paul's words compelling and challenging and calling out to my life to live in such a time as this for the sake of our church, for the sake of our country, and for the sake of our world. Amen.